What could be happening in the abandoned Chernobyl forest? In 1986, the world came to a standstill in the face of an unimaginable disaster. The explosion at the Chernobyl nuclear power plant turned a thriving city into a ghost town. But what no one expected was that, decades later, nature would reclaim the site in a frighteningly surprising way. Scientists are finding something in the shadows of the forest that is leaving the entire planet intrigued. For a long time, the image of Chernobyl was that of a wasteland, a place where life seemed doomed to disappear. Since the reactor explosion, the exclusion zone has become a symbol of human vulnerability in the face of technology and nature. However, in recent years, scientists have begun to notice signs that challenge this gloomy narrative. It was as if the surrounding forest was refusing to die. Trees were growing in soil impregnated with radiation. Wild animals were venturing into the ruins of old abandoned villages, and most intriguingly, microscopic life forms were behaving in a way that no one could explain. This wasn't a simple question of biological resistance. It was something beyond what modern science could comprehend. The real challenge began when the researchers tried to understand what was going on. They couldn't believe what the data was showing. The highly contaminated soil had pockets of microorganisms that seemed not only to survive, but to thrive. These organisms, dubbed radiotrophic fungi, were absorbing radiation and transforming it into energy, as if they were plants doing photosynthesis, but using radiation instead of sunlight. It was as if biology itself had decided to rewrite its rules within that exclusion zone. But this raised much bigger and much more disturbing questions. If life forms could adapt and even depend on radiation, what did that mean for the mutations that were occurring in other species in the region? Were these adaptations just helping the organisms to survive, or could they trigger unpredictable changes in the ecosystem? More than that, there were ethical and philosophical implications. Some researchers began to question whether the exclusion zone was really a disaster for nature, or whether human absence had created a space where life, against all expectations, could evolve in unimaginable ways. However, there was an even more pressing problem. These discoveries were not just a scientific enigma. They carried direct implications for humanity. If organisms could adapt to radiation, could we learn to do the same? Would it be possible to apply these discoveries in areas such as medicine, agriculture, or even space exploration? Or were we playing with forces we didn't fully understand? In addition, scientists began to worry about another issue. What if these mutations weren't entirely beneficial? What if, in the midst of all this adaptation, organisms emerged that could pose a real threat to human health or the ecological balance in other regions? The line between biological miracle and evolutionary danger has never seemed so blurred. Each new discovery in the Chernobyl forest seemed to raise more questions than answers. And that was exactly what made this investigation so fascinating and so frightening at the same time. What was happening in that forest wasn't just a mystery, it was a brutal reminder that life always finds a way, but not always in the way we expect or desire. And now, the world was about to discover something even more surprising in the heart of the exclusion zone. The enigma lay before them, pulsating with a fascination that mixed fear and hope. It was impossible to ignore the implications of what the Chernobyl forest was revealing. The scientists' first step was to map the extent of the radiotrophic fungi and understand how they worked. Under the microscopes of the makeshift laboratory, they discovered something extraordinary. These organisms possessed melanin, the same pigment that gives color to human skin, but here with a radically different function. Instead of protecting against ultraviolet rays as in humans, the melanin in the fungi seemed to act as a biological antenna, capturing radiation and converting it into chemical energy. It was as if they were consuming what, for other life forms, was a lethal poison. The researchers spent months analyzing the unique properties of these organisms, taking samples of the trees, soil, and even abandoned buildings that had become home to this new life form. But the surprises didn't stop there. In a more isolated area of the forest, the team found a species of lichen that exhibited an equally baffling behavior. Not only did this lichen grow on highly contaminated surfaces, but it seemed to neutralize the radiation around it, creating small safe pockets where other plants began to emerge. It was such a complex chain of adaptation that it seemed impossible not to wonder, was this the start of a completely new ecosystem shaped by radiation? Meanwhile, the monitoring cameras installed throughout the exclusion zone began to capture images that seemed straight out of a science fiction documentary. Wolves, wild boars, and even eagles, which would normally avoid high radiation environments, were not only surviving, but thriving. Some of them showed subtle but noticeable changes, such as thicker coats of fur or unusual resistance to disease. In a pioneering experiment, scientists monitored subsequent generations of wild mice and found that their cells seemed to be adapting to repair genetic damage caused by radiation at an impressive rate. It was as if evolution itself was accelerating in that area, defying all predictions. But the more the scientists delved into this strange world, the more they found points of tension. In a series of genetic tests, they noticed that some of the mutations observed in smaller organisms, such as insects and microorganisms, created aberrations that were not only unstable, but also potentially dangerous. In one incident that startled the team, a colony of radioactive ants seemed to have developed a voracious capacity for consumption, destroying any organic matter in their path. What had begun as a study of resilience now also raised a disturbing question. Could these adaptations escape the exclusion zone and begin to interact with external ecosystems? What's more, the practical implications of the findings were vast. Biotechnology companies began to take an interest in radioactive fungi, imagining applications in the production of medicines, the treatment of nuclear waste, and even the colonization of other planets. If simple organisms could thrive under extreme conditions, why not humans in future space missions? However, commercial exploitation brought with it ethical dilemmas that divided the scientific community. Were we ready to mess with such complex and unknown forces? Or could the desire for progress lead us to repeat past mistakes, creating even more disastrous consequences than Chernobyl itself? In the midst of all this exploration, a growing feeling gripped the team that no matter how much they discovered, the forest still held deeper secrets. They had only scratched the surface of what seemed to be a silent revolution of life on Earth. However, as they unraveled layer after layer of this mystery, something began to emerge from the shadows, an even more surprising and disturbing truth that would leave them speechless. And then it happened. In the heart of the forest, on a particularly dark night, as the scientific team finished a day of data collection, a strange sound echoed through the exclusion zone. It was a low, pulsating noise, almost like a heartbeat, but coming from underground. The measuring instruments, which until then had only recorded radiation readings, began to show unusual oscillations, as if something deep was altering the natural balance of the area. Intrigued, the scientists decided to investigate immediately, following the readings to an old underground facility which, until that moment, had been considered inaccessible due to the high levels of contamination. As they entered the facility, the heavy metallic air seemed to vibrate with an energy that none of them could explain. Under layers of dust and debris, they found a sealed entrance, apparently untouched since the 1986 disaster. After hours of painstaking work, they finally managed to open the rusty gate, revealing a room that looked like something out of a nightmare. In the center of the space, there was a strange cluster of radiating roots and fungi, pulsating with a weak, greenish light. It seemed almost alive, as if it were breathing. The environment was so hostile that, even with state-of-the-art protective clothing, the team felt the immediate effects of the radiation. But what really shocked them wasn't the radiation, it was what was contained there. In the middle of the biological formation was a liquid substance, dense and black, which seemed to move on its own, as if it had consciousness. Carefully collected samples revealed that the liquid was composed of elements unknown in the periodic table and had unimaginable properties. Not only did it absorb radiation more efficiently than any material ever discovered, but it also seemed to generate enough energy to power entire electrical systems. In a series of initial tests, the scientists connected a small piece of equipment to the liquid and, incredibly, it worked like a biological battery with unlimited potential. But what was supposed to be a revolutionary discovery quickly became a point of terror. When the scientists exposed samples of the liquid to the open air, they realized that it reacted unpredictably, expanding and interacting with the surrounding elements. Within minutes, the substance began to corrode the material in which it was stored and, more worryingly, seemed to react aggressively when in contact with organic compounds. It was as if the liquid had an intelligence of its own, protecting itself and trying to expand, almost like a parasite looking for a new host. The team realized too late that releasing something so unstable could have devastating consequences. In the midst of the panic, heated discussion divided the scientists. Should they continue studying the material right there, or destroy it immediately before it was too late? The moral dilemma gripped the group. Some argued that the substance could revolutionize the world. It had the potential to solve global energy crises, reduce nuclear waste, and pave the way for unimaginable technologies. But others couldn't ignore the risks. If something went wrong, it wouldn't just be Chernobyl that would face the consequences. The whole world could be in danger. As the debate intensified, an emergency alarm sounded. The liquid, apparently sensitive to human emotions, had begun to expand again, absorbing radiation from the environment at an alarming rate. With no other choice, the team was forced to improvise a last-minute containment, using all available tools to isolate the substance before it escaped from the lab. It was hours of tension, sweat, and desperation, while the pulsating light of the biological cluster seemed to mock their efforts. And then, at the last second, they managed to block the expansion, but at a high cost. One of the team members, who had sacrificed himself to activate the system manually, was trapped in a contaminated room, leaving everyone in absolute silence. When they finally left the facility, exhausted and emotionally destroyed, it became clear that the discovery was not just a milestone in scientific history, it was a warning. What they had found in the Chernobyl forest was not only a reflection of life's resilience, but also a brutal reminder that not all mysteries are meant to be solved. However, as they left the exclusion zone, a question hung in the air. What if that liquid wasn't an accident of nature, but a legacy left there to be found, waiting for the right time to reveal its true purpose? Upon returning to the base, the scientific team knew they had crossed an invisible line, a barrier between the knowledge we can control and that which can control us. The discovery made in the Chernobyl forest was much more than a scientific breakthrough. It was a direct reflection of how humanity has dealt with technology and nature, a race to master forces we barely understand. The enigmatic liquid, with its ability to absorb and store radiation, could be the solution to one of humanity's greatest crises, or the harbinger of its doom. But what really frightened everyone was not the technological potential, but the feeling that the substance had a consciousness, an intention of its own that defied logic and science as we know it. The data collected was immediately sealed, and the exact location of the facility was again hidden under layers of bureaucracy and secrecy. Conflicting reports began to circulate. Some said that the substance had been destroyed forever, others that a small sample had been sent to top-secret laboratories around the world. There were those who believed that the liquid could be the key to a new era of prosperity, but also those who feared that it was the seed of an apocalypse. Among the team, however, one thing was clear. The Chernobyl forest was not just a radioactive area. It was a place where nature, forced to evolve under extreme conditions, had created something beyond our understanding, something that perhaps should never have been discovered. Even after months of analysis, the sense of mystery remained. The scientists who took part in the expedition rarely talked about what they saw, but those who dared to share their experiences described sleepless nights, haunted by the thought that they had awakened something that should never have been disturbed. And in a dark corner of their minds, they all wondered, what if what they had encountered was only the beginning? What if, somewhere in the depths of the Chernobyl forest, another secret was waiting to be revealed? A secret that, when discovered, could change the fate of humanity forever. Just for those of you who like a good story and have watched to the end, leave your comment below from which city you're watching, and I'll leave a heart in your comment. Bye, and see you in the next video.